Go ahead and get started. And I'm Lisa Middleton, Palm Springs City Council, member of the subcommittee, along with Jeff Coors, who is conveniently out of the country for this. We have had now over 20 community meetings, and we're very pleased to do that. We have one more community meeting coming up next Monday evening at the James O. Jesse Center up in the Desert Highland neighborhood. In a minute, I'm going to ask Anthony Mejia, our incredible city clerk, to come up and just give an overview of some of the process that we have gone through and where we're at in that process. But very quickly, for those who may be a little bit new to this, we received earlier this year a demand letter from an attorney in Malibu, Mr. Shankman. He has been sending demand letters of the sort that we received to a number of cities, not the only law firm in California. There are about 4 law firms, 2 in Northern California, 2 in Southern California, that have been doing quite a bit of this. This is not unusual in civil rights actions that you see independent law firms that are very aggressive in trying to advance civil rights issues. This is, we believe, a civil rights issue, and the legislature believed it was. At-large voting in numerous cities has been used to disenfranchise and to diminish the political power of minority groups. And the evidence of that is extremely well-founded. So the legislature, and in particular the Latino caucus in the legislature, made changing municipal elections from being primarily at large to primarily district-based a priority for them, and laws were changed so as to make it easy for individuals to prove racially polarized voting, and very difficult for cities that wanted to be resistant. We have had a few cities that have resisted, most famously the city of Palmdale. And in that, it went to the courts. The courts found in favor of the plaintiffs. The city was then ordered to pay plaintiffs' attorney's fees in excess of $4 million. Their own legal fees were somewhere in excess of $2 million. And after all of that was over, it was the plaintiffs, not the city, that drew the district boundaries. Palm Springs has a reputation that we believe we have earned as being a diverse and inclusive community. And that's an important value to our community. Yet in the 80 years that we have been a city, we have elected 1 African American and 1 Latino to our city council. 1/3 of our city are people of color. Approximately 25% of our population is Latino, approximately 5% African American, about 4-5% Asian American, and about 1% Native American. So with almost 1/3 of our city being members of minority groups, we think we can do better. And we are trying through this process to ensure that everyone in our community has an opportunity to be represented and to feel represented. And one of the things that's been very gratifying in the over 20 meetings that we have had is the opportunity to speak with and start to see engagements from communities that felt they never had an opportunity to be represented and to be heard. At one of the neighborhood meeting or outreach programs that we had, I was sitting across a table from a woman who had lived in Palm Springs for over 20 years, a Latino woman with multiple children in Palm Springs schools, and her statement to me, "This is the first time anyone has ever asked me what I thought." the implication was even beyond that, that it was the first time she felt that anyone cared what she thought. So we really are trying to reach out to our entire community. I want to thank the people who have been on our working group that are here with us this evening, Kathy Wormick and Stephen Moses and Ed Doobie, who have been absolutely stellar in this whole process. So I'm going to let Anthony, yes, talk you through just a little bit of the process things. Then we are going to ask for your questions, and we would like to begin with whatever questions you have. We will spend as much time as we need to answer all of your questions. Once we've finished with the questions, we will move on to what are your comments? What do you like? What do you not like? And we want to hear that. There are no timers. This is incredibly informal this evening, so we're here to engage with you. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Anthony Mejia, City Clerk for Palm Springs, and I'll just start off by saying, so that letter that we received from Shankman, that was as him representing the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, which is a civil rights organization for Latinos, and they're represented throughout the state. And so on behalf of that organization, he sent the letter to Palm Springs. On April 19th, the City Council discussed and decided to adopt a resolution of intention to transition to district-based elections. Upon receiving that letter, they were a little taken back at first, but after they realized that this was an opportunity for the city to enhance minority voting power and to also improve the community overall, the City Council decided to adopt that resolution. On May 10th, the City Council formed its Cvra working group, and I'll name those members are Aftab Dada, Ed Doobie, Grace Gardner, Dixie Miller, Stephen Moses, Alexis Ortega, Kathy Wormick, and Tobias Wolf. And so those community members represent a variety of different areas throughout the city, and they were selected to provide independent recommendations to the City Council in relation to the districting process, as well as a variety of other elections-related issues and boards and commissions. On May 16th, the Cvra working group recommended a statement of principles to the City Council, and the Council adopted them unanimously. Those were to maximize the goals of the California Voting Rights Act, including civil rights, equality, and inclusion, to prioritize the creation of minority-majority districts, to the extent practical, keeping organized neighborhoods intact, and to maintain the principle that the best interest of the city as a whole remains the first responsibility of all elected officials. After that, the City Council, between July and September, convened numerous community engagement forums, including the community at large, as well as business interest. We opened up our map drawing session so that we provided tools to the community, including online mapping systems that our demographers actually use, paper-based systems, and Excel spreadsheets to assist in developing those maps. And we received over 30 community-based maps, as well as 8 maps drawn by our demographer, which is National Demographic Corporation. On September 27th, the Cvra working group presented its recommendations related to a variety of issues on districting, including 4 districts or 5 districts, boards and commission recruitment efforts, and how to remove barriers for City Council candidates to run in the future. On December 4th, the City Council provided direction to move forward with 5 districts. And then on October 18th, the City Council narrowed the remaining maps from 19 to top 5 maps, which are presented tonight. Now, through October through November 15th, we're holding a number of community engagement forums, including tonight, and our next one is on November 5th at the James O'Jesse Desert Highland Unity Center. To get community feedback on these proposed maps, we've distributed to all of you the ballots, what we're calling a ballot, which has all of the maps presented, and we're asking for you to indicate which one is your favorite and to provide any comments that you can as to why that's your favorite map or what modifications you would like to see to that favorite map. And then All those comments will be provided to the City Council for its packet on November 15th, in which we'll be asking the City Council to select a top 1 or 2 maps, make any major modifications that they want to make to those maps. Those will be represented to the community and to the City Council on November 29th. And at that point, the council will make any final modifications to its top map. And then on December 5th, we'll ask the City Council to adopt the map without any additional modifications and to introduce the ordinance. And then finally, on December 19th, we'll ask the council to adopt the ordinance to transition to district-based elections. And then you will see your first district-based election in November of 2019, in which 3 council members will be selected by district, and then the remaining 2 council members will still be at-large council members until their election in 2021, unless that changes due to some state law requirements.
So with that, can we start to answer your questions? Do you have any? Yes, sir.
Once the districts are drawn, how soon will redistricting take place again, and what's that process? So how long will these maps be around?
These maps will be around through till the next census is done. The next census will start in 2020, will be completed sometime in early 2021. So it is sometime during 2021 that we would potentially be redrawing districts. As just to how soon, and Anthony, please correct me if I'm wrong, we can draw in 2021 is going to depend on how soon we have the data to do so. One of the things that will happen when we receive the new census data is we will immediately ask Anthony and his team to do a demographic review of all of the existing 5 districts that we have, and we will then know, do we have any population imbalances based on the new data? Let's assume for a moment we don't have any that have to be changed under law. Then the question would be, are there reasons that we want to make changes independent of having to? And that's conceivable. We could have realized after the fact, oh my gosh, we made a terrible mistake with where we drew the boundaries in this area. We've separated an important community of interest, and we need to bring that community of interest back together. Hopefully we don't make that mistake, but I've been around government long enough to know you sometimes don't find out what terrible thing you did until after you have done it. But let's assume that there are 1 or more districts that are now population imbalanced. The first step, I think, will be, what do we need to do to remedy those imbalances, and what's the least amount of changes that are necessary to remedy those imbalances?
Okay, I'll ask one other question then. And then whoever else puts their hand up, I'll hand them the mic. How many neighborhood organizations at this moment does it look like would potentially be split?
That's challenging because each map has its own number of neighborhoods that would be split, and just because they're split on the maps now doesn't mean the council won't modify those maps or those boundaries to remedy as many of those neighborhood splits as possible.
So one of our goals is not to split neighborhoods. I think we were pretty honest to everyone right at the very beginning. With 45 neighborhoods, to be 100% no splits, that could be a tough lift, but we're going to make our best effort. So far, we have taken, and we've got a lot of meetings, Anthony and I, coming up with every neighborhood where there's even a possibility that they will be split, and we're looking at numbers in those neighborhoods. The ideal population for any individual district is 8,910. So if you've got a split of a neighborhood that is 500, 600 people in each, that's going to be problematic. If it's 50, 100, 150, 200, those are much easier to take and make adjustments. One of the things that we always have to remember, if you take from Peter, you have to give something to somebody else. And you've actually, in this, if you take from Peter, you've got to give Peter back what you took from him, and that has to come from some other district. So I don't know if that's a long-winded answer. The short answer is, I think when the end of the day comes on November 29, we are going to see very, very little districts that are neighborhoods that are split. Yes, sir.
If those districts have to be changed after the census, who makes the change and what would be the process? Would you be going through this whole process again, or is
Comes back to City Council, and I think one of the things, and I don't want to speak for a council 2 years down the road, but if there's very modest changes, council will probably act pretty quickly based on those, the modest needs. If we see some substantial differences, and we're hearing from the community there's been some dissatisfaction with the maps as they were originally drawn, we may convene another working group such as what we did.
May I add, do you have any information on how much of a change in the demographics are from 2016? Is it significant?
So, if we look at the demographics on the back of the maps, do you have a set of maps? So if we just look in the backside of the Pearl map, on the very top line, it's got, for instance, District 1, 8,844 being the total population. If we were to go down to about halfway down the page to ACS population estimate, which is now 9,674, that's based on the American Community Survey, which is updated. The last update was in 2016. And so you can just see that the total population for District 1 has gone up about 800 people between 2010 to 2016. Of course, those surveys are estimates done by the census. So once we have the new 2020 census data, that will reconcile any of these differences.
Okay, so that's your point, the ACS.
Yes, that's the 2016 estimates.
We provided Council, the Cvra working group, with a map that showed all the areas that have been entitled, which means they've been approved and they'll get built out. But most of those won't be built until we get to the 2020 census. So in terms of new things going in, we don't think there'll be a big change, but there's always small changes. We don't know the impact of vacation rentals. I mean, there's some things that have happened in the last 10 years that, and we don't know how many people own second homes right now as opposed to living here.
And Kathy is the chair of the Planning Commission, and I believe she meant to say 2030 census.
Oh, 2030.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the build out of those communities will be around the 2030 census. So even at the 2020 mark, we may not have much adjustment. Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Either we've been too overwhelming or you're getting it. Okay. Are there comments that anyone would like to make? And this, by the way, is Dieter Crawford, who was responsible for drawing one of the really, really good maps.
So my question is, when will the city be switching to even year elections?
Good question. And the question was, when are we going to split to even year elections? There's been a change in law that is very strongly encouraging cities to move away from holding their elections in the odd years and get on the even years. Palm Springs is, we have really good voter turnout compared to a lot of other municipalities. Our voter turnout in our municipals is reasonably close to gubernatorial elections. But even in our city, in presidential election years, there's definitely an upturn in the number of people who turn out. I've been listening to some of the attorneys argue back and forth as to whether or not this change in law in fact applies to Palm Springs. I think at the end of the day, whether it does or does not, and I'm not going to take a position on whether the law applies right now because I'm not the attorney, getting more turnout in your elections is an extremely laudable goal. And so the most likely scenario that has been discussed is that we will hold an election in 2021 and 3 members of City Council will be up for election and that they will be elected for terms that will last 3 years. 2019, excuse me. So that would then take them to 2022. Councilmember Holstage and I will be up for re-election in 2021. Those elections would also be for 3 years, running through 2024. And by then, all of the elections after that will be for 4-year terms, and we will be on cycle with the rest of California.
Questions?
Comments from anyone? Things you like, don't like in the maps? Yeah.
Would you provide an overview for us on how the mayor will be selected from amongst the council members? There are several options, I believe.
The decision is to move to 5 districts. And our charter calls for 5 members of City Council. So the mayor will be rotated in some fashion, elected from within the council. We have not made any decision as to what that process will be. The most common process that is used in cities our size is for a rotation based on seniority, each individual getting an opportunity to serve, the terms being 1 year long, and anyone having the opportunity to opt out and to say, I just prefer not to carry on the duties of mayor. One of the things we're definitely going to find moving forward when you're in 5 districts is a lot of the ribbon cutting and ceremonial responsibilities I think are going to get distributed to all 5. If you're opening the new restaurant, if you're opening the new place of business in a district, it likely will have been the city council member for that district that was with you when you started first talking to the city about opening the business, that worked with you as you went through the planning process, that helped you get over the hump, and they're going to want to be there to celebrate when the business actually opens. Certainly, it is going to be the district representative who's going to be responsible for handling constituent issues in each and every district. Other comments from anyone?
I hate to repeat myself from the last meeting, but I'll do it so that we can have this conversation about what constitutes a district. My concern, and when I drew a set of maps, was putting districts with similar housing composition, so that we had apartments and more affordable housing clustered, and so as to provide an opportunity to have a representative that reflects the interest of basically a moderate or lower income district, one where policing and pavement and garbage collection and things like that may be more of a concern than would be the case in a higher income neighborhood. So that to me is one criteria, and it actually fairly closely reflects issues also of minority, I always reverse this, minority majority, here we go, minority majority neighborhoods.
So, and I think, do people tend to rent or own homes? Are they multifamily, single family? Those are very important communities of interest. So we have some demographic data that you can see on the back of the charts that are helpful, and I would very much welcome comments that come into City Council and into us through this process to say, I think map X is the best map because it produces districts that tend to congregate individuals that are renters, that are multifamily, that have low income, that Spanish is a predominant language spoken in the home, and I could go on.
So besides keeping my own neighborhood together of Gene Autry, I'm also concerned about some districts that mix very wealthy neighborhoods with working class neighborhoods, such as ourselves. And I know there's a lot of factors that you just mentioned, and I know that also was just mentioned a moment ago, but that to me is also concerning,
Thank you for that. That came up at City Council, and there are a couple of City Council members who spoke that, well, do we want to have all of the wealthy folks in one neighborhood, or excuse me, in one district? And certainly there are some potential disadvantages for that, but if we spread those neighborhoods into every one of our districts, then we run the risk of diminishing what we're trying to achieve. And so I think it's important, if you want to preserve some of our lower income communities together, that will, just simply from the math, necessitate that we probably will end up with some of our wealthier communities congregated together. Personally, in some respects, since a large number of our wealthier communities are west of Palm Canyon and in the hillsides, that is a very reasonable community of interest that you would want to have a representative who has hillside communities kept together, because hillside issues are so unique.
On that, would you then say that having the wealthy communities together, the poorer communities in one district, that gives them more representation by separating?
It's going to be one of the trade-offs that we take a look at, but we've got a couple of maps where they seem to be spread a little bit more, and others where there's a bit more concentration of wealthier communities. And this is going to be a decision of 5 members of City Council. And right now, what I'm trying to give you is a little bit of some of the thinking that I'm hearing, but I'm mostly interested in what you're thinking.
Okay. But you think that would be meeting the goals of the representation of diversity?
One of the things we're trying to do is to get representation for all of our communities.
Okay.
Are there others? We are going to be here for a few minutes, so if you would like to just come up and talk with any one of us individually, one-on-one, we'll be happy to do that, but oh, okay.
We've got 2 people who created maps here. Maybe they can talk a little bit about what they saw and why they worked on their map. Both Ed and Dieter are here.
I don't know how much I have to add to the discussion that we've had already. Let me just stand up. I would point out that the map that is the Doobie 2 map is, when you apply the dilution factor, when we actually look at citizens of voting age, it has the greatest dilution of the what that means is when you look at total population, that's a hard demographic number, and all the districts have to be within the same 10% of total population. When you look at citizens of voting age population, when you actually look at who's enfranchised under the law as a hard demographic, there is what's known as a dilution factor. We find in Palm Springs the dilution factor hits the Latino community the hardest because there is a big percentage of children who are under the age of 21 who cannot vote. And in some of the neighborhoods it's as high as 50%, which is quite a significant dilution. Therefore, in looking at creating an equal playing field between majorities and minorities, we should look at citizens of voting age. And when you look at that hardcore demographic, the map all the way over really doesn't attain a 50-50 even playing field. That's why it wasn't immediately put forward as the other 4 maps. Just keep that in mind.
I have a question for you. One of the discussions that we're having is whether or not downtown should be kept together in more or less 1 or 2 districts, or should we try to have as many as 3 or 4 districts that touch the downtown? Do any of you have strong opinions on how downtown should be dealt with?
I believe there was a comment made fairly in on the process from somebody from probably Cathedral City, indicated that they had divided downtown, their 111 corridor, and that struck me as a really good idea. So the map that I submitted had 2 core downtown districts and a teeny corner at Ramon, where Ramon and Indian Canyon and Palm Canyon come together. So you got sort of like the 500 or something like that in that district. I think that given the importance of downtown, while it is a community of interest, it is a key component of our economic development. And I think then spreading the love of downtown of 2 members and perhaps a small one, a third one, would be potentially a good idea.
I kind of disagree with that. I like downtown to be in one district, because then they have someone who's representing their interest, and you still have all the council members, which anything comes up, you're all going to be giving input for your neighborhoods based on what's going on down there.
Thank you. Another very important institution in our city is the airport. And most of the maps have 3 districts that touch the boundaries of the airport. And I know for those who live on the east side of town and the north, and somewhat as well on parts of the south side of Palm Springs, proximity to the airport is extremely important. And one of the things I like about the 5 maps that we have is almost, I think every one of them has at least 3 districts touching the airport at one place or another. Any reactions to that?
Just quickly, relating to noise with the airport, that's good that it's spread a lot across a very large area, that people would be able to have influence over that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Regarding noise of the airport, it's good that enough people, enough districts are touching it so that they have some kind of input on that particular problem if it becomes one.
Having lived in neighborhoods where the sightseeing planes fly over all the time, I actually wasn't particularly concerned about the airport itself because the noise from flights are scattered throughout the city.
Living in an airport-adjacent community, we have on occasion heard the noise from jets being worked on at night where they rev their engines on a 24-hour basis. The small flyovers aren't a big issue, but there is noise from the airport and also the industry that's around the airport and the museum from the airport, which is occasionally a big noise generator. But I just wanted to talk about the commercial districts. I was at the meeting last Saturday night where I think it was Dieter talked about the importance of the fact that the commercial districts aren't all downtown, and that there's a very big commercial district that impacts what's sort of the North District on 4 of the maps, which is on Ramon where Walmart is and Home Depot and Lowe's. And I know as a person who lives there, I tend to shop there a lot more and go there more than I go downtown. So I think we have to think that I do think we have more than one commercial district.
I agree, very definitely. And one of the things that the Desert Highland neighborhood has in common with the Demuth Park neighborhood is that both of them have light industrial manufacturing immediately adjacent to their neighborhood. Another area of alignment is cannabis operations are beginning to congregate in certain neighborhoods, and that is creating some issues for those neighborhoods. Anything else from anyone? Going once, going twice? All right. We will be here for a few minutes. If you would like to come up one-on-one, we would love to have a chance to talk with you. Thank you for coming out this evening. Yes, sir. What we would like you to do is put your gold star next, or gold circle next to the map that you think is the best, but most importantly, on that ballot map, please identify what it is that you like and don't like. The reasoning is really important to us.